This isn't a story that starts with a bang. It starts with a whisper. The kind you hear when you're alone in a quiet house at night, and the floorboards creak for no reason. It's the story of the things that live in the walls of our modern world. Not in the plaster and wood, but in the wires and the waves that connect us all. We've given them names to make them feel less terrifying. Fancy Bear, the loud one who kicks in the front door. Voodoo Bear, the saboteur who breaks the things that keep the lights on. But this story is about the other one. The one you never hear. The one called Cozy Bear. It doesn't make a sound. It doesn't break a thing. Its only goal is to get comfortable. To find a soft, warm, forgotten corner deep inside the systems that run our lives, our governments, our power grids, our very secrets, and to make a nest. To get so cozy, so comfortable, that it becomes part of the furniture. A piece of the architecture you no longer notice. This is the hunt for that comfort. It's a search for the ghost in the machine who isn't a ghost at all, but a permanent, silent tenant. It's about finding the bear that isn't hibernating, but is wide awake, listening in the dark, waiting for the perfect moment to whisper a single devastating word into the ear of its masters. So get comfortable, settle in, and let's go looking for the bear that made itself at home. You might just find it's been curled up in your own house all along. To truly comprehend the silent war being waged against the foundations of Western democracy, one must first become a digital naturalist. We have to study the behaviors, habitats, and evolutionary paths of a new class of predator that has evolved in the vast, unregulated wilderness of the global internet. These are not mere individual actors, but institutionalized species, each with distinct hunting patterns, prey preferences, and survival strategies, meticulously shaped by the dark incentives of a resurgent authoritarian state. The names we gave them, Fancy Bear, Cozy Bear, Voodoo Bear, emerged not from a place of understanding, but from a very human need to label the faceless, amorphous threats materializing from the digital static. This naming system, born in the sterile, fluorescent-lit conference rooms of Western cybersecurity firms, doesn't quite capture their true nature. A Fancy Bear operation is a digital bludgeon, a kinetic force of disruption designed to create immediate chaos and seize headlines. Think of it as smashing a window and grabbing whatever you can. A Voodoo Bear is a strategic saboteur, a cold-eyed breaker of critical systems whose work unfolds in the darkened control rooms of power grids and satellite networks. This is the one that flips the switches and turns off the lights for an entire city. But the Cozy Bear is something far more insidious, a slow-acting pathogen. It doesn't seek to break the door down with a spectacular crash. It seeks to alter the host's very DNA from the inside. Its goal is to make sure the body's defenses no longer recognize the infection as a threat, and may even begin to work for it. Cozy Bear doesn't want to break your system. It wants to become your system. Their ecosystem is a mirror world, a distorted, malicious reflection of our own interconnected digital society. Its headquarters are in the unmarked, fortified towers of Moscow's aquarium, the GRU headquarters, and the sleek, modern, yet equally opaque offices of the SVR, the Foreign Intelligence Service. They operate with the impunity of state-sanctioned ghosts, their actions systematically blurring the ancient lines between soldier and hacker, diplomat and troll, truth and fiction. This is not a conventional conflict of armies meeting on a defined field of battle. It is a slow, insidious, and perpetual campaign of erosion, targeting the very bedrock of liberal democracy: trust. Trust in our elections, trust in our media, trust in each other. The bears, therefore, are not merely a threat to our computer networks. They represent a systemic, existential threat to our collective perception of reality, our faith in public institutions, and our fundamental ability to discern truth from a carefully manufactured lie. 2015 German Bundestag hack. Maybe something about a staffer named Claudia Heidt and a dodgy email. But that story barely scratches the surface. The real operation was a masterclass in modern espionage, a symphony of digital infiltration conducted by the notorious Russian hacking group Fancy Bear. This wasn't just a hack, it was a campaign. It all began months, maybe even a year, before a single line of malicious code hit a German government computer. A special subunit within Fancy Bear, an identity construction team, was busy creating a completely fake digital persona. They built a ghost. Their mission was to invent a junior researcher at a real German think tank, someone specializing in Eastern European affairs. This wasn't just a fake email address. We're talking a full-blown, meticulously crafted LinkedIn profile, complete with a stolen stock photo and a believable work history. They created posts on political science forums and even ran a dummy blog with sober commentary on EU-Russia relations. This digital ghost had to be so convincing that any curious parliamentary aide who checked them out would find nothing suspicious. It was the ultimate long game bait. Then came the infamous email. On April 30th, 2015, an email supposedly from the United Nations landed in the inboxes of key figures within the Bundestag. This wasn't spam. It was a targeted spearphishing attack, a technique called whaling, aimed only at high-value targets whose work made them interested in a confidential UN report on Ukraine as economy. The email and its attachment were a work of dark digital art. The attachment itself contained a zero-day exploit, a digital weapon targeting a previously unknown and unpatched vulnerability in Microsoft Windows. On the clandestine markets where these exploits are bought and sold, this one piece of code could have been worth over $250,000. Using it on the Bundestag showed just how desperately Russia wanted inside Germany's political core, the heart of Europe's largest economy and a key NATO ally. The moment Claudia Height clicked that attachment, a silent, automated payload sequence began. The first stage, a lightweight piece of malware now known as Sophacy or X-Agent, instantly cataloged her computer. In milliseconds, it noted the operating system, the security software, her network privileges, and even her location based on her IP address. This data was encrypted and sent back to a command and control server, hidden on a compromised small business server in Romania, a classic move to hide the trail. Once the analysts back at GRU headquarters confirmed they had hooked a high-value target inside the parliamentary network, they deployed the second stage, a tool called X-Tunnel. This wasn't just malware. It was a military-grade tunneling tool. It created a persistent, encrypted connection back to its masters, disguising all its activity as normal, secure web traffic. To the network security systems, it was just another computer browsing the web. It was a ghost in the machine, silently breathing, invisible to all but the most advanced monitoring tools. The German parliament was now compromised, and the attackers had a permanent, hidden backdoor to steal its most sensitive secrets. The goal wasn't just to steal a few files. It was to map the entire network, to understand its structure, its weaknesses, and its most valuable data repositories. Over the next several weeks, the hackers moved laterally through the system, a process known as pivoting. They used the initial foothold on one computer to compromise others, escalating their privileges step by step. They hunted for the Holy Grail, the domain controller. This is the central server that manages all user accounts and permissions for the entire network. Gaining control of it is like getting the master key to every single room in the building. And they got it. With administrator access to the entire Bundestag network, they could create their own user accounts, access any mailbox, and download any document they wanted. Over a period of weeks, they systematically exfiltrated at least 16 gigabytes of data, a digital treasure trove of emails, documents, and sensitive political communications. It was a devastating breach, one of the most significant cyber attacks against a Western democracy in history, and it all started with a single, perfectly crafted lie. Imagine being so good at your job that you can build a perfect working copy of an entire government's computer network in your own office. For 2 weeks, Russian state hackers, known as Fancy Bear, did just that. They weren't just looking for files in the German Bundestag. They were hunting for power, for the digital keys to the whole kingdom. They used incredibly advanced techniques, like Kerberoasting, to steal the credentials of system administrators, the people who hold the master keys. With a trick called pass the hash, they could pretend to be these admins, moving freely across the network without ever needing their actual passwords. With this godlike access, they moved from server to server, department to department. And here's the truly audacious part. They didn't just steal data. They built a complete mirrored shadow copy of the entire parliamentary network on their own servers in Russia. This virtual replica let them search and steal information at their leisure, long after they were kicked out of the original system. It was a persistent threat, a ghost in their machine that wouldn't go away. Their main target? The crown jewels, Angela Merkel's parliamentary office. The programmer tasked with this, using the alias Scaramouche, was likely a young officer in the GRU super-secret unit 26,165. This group is so secretive, its existence was a state secret until Western intelligence agencies painstakingly pieced it together. And this is where it gets interesting. In a moment of panic, Scaramouche struggled with a German letter, the U umlaut. This tiny detail reveals the human behind the keyboard. These aren't flawless robots. They're often overworked young men, operating under immense pressure. A single misstepped character, a forgotten note in the code. These were the small human errors that cracked their armor of anonymity. These threads eventually led German prosecutors and the FBI right to their real names and front doors. This same group orchestrated a symphony of chaos during the 2016 US election. While Fancy Bear's loud, aggressive hack of the DNC and John Podesta's emails grabbed all the headlines. That was just the grand finale. A much quieter, more patient operation had been going on for over a year, conducted by a different group entirely. This group, known as Cozy Bear, is linked to Russia's more traditional foreign intelligence service, the SVR. They had already established a deep, long-term presence inside the DNC's systems. Their mission was classic espionage, to understand the Democratic Party's internal workings, its strategies, its weaknesses, and what its leaders really thought about their own candidates. Cozy Bear acted as the ultimate fly on the wall, listening in on 1,000 digital conversations, gathering intelligence not with a bang, but with a whisper. Cozy Bear and Fancy Bear. But what if I told you the two bears in this story weren't partners? What if they were bitter rivals, fighting each other from within the same intelligence apparatus? Let's dive into the fascinating and, frankly, terrifying case of Korovia's cyber warfare. Analysts studying the digital breadcrumbs left behind made a startling discovery. Two separate Korovian intelligence divisions, let's call them Unit Ironclaw and Unit Frostbelt, were operating in the same digital space. But they weren't cooperating. Instead, they were locked in an intense, cutthroat competition for funding, talent, and most critically, praise from their government. Think of it like two sales teams from the same company sabotaging each other to hit their targets. This internal rivalry had explosive consequences. Unit Ironclaw launched a loud, clumsy intrusion that was quickly spotted by an independent cybersecurity firm called Brightwall Security. When Brightwall went public with their findings mid-year, it blew the lid off everything. This likely infuriated Unit Frostbelt. Why? Because they had been running a much stealthier, long-term operation in the same network. Ironclaw's noisy break-in got them all kicked out, ruining years of covert work. This single event exposed a massive crack in the unified, powerful image that Korovia desperately tries to project to the world. But the story doesn't end there. The fallout led to a masterclass in psychological manipulation. This wasn't just about leaking data. It was about weaponizing information to control the story. The target? An election in a neighboring democratic country. The leaks were strategically timed, fed through a friendly media outlet known as OpenScroll, and promoted by a fabricated online persona called Shade Rider. Each new data drop was a bombshell, perfectly calculated to dominate the news cycle, derail campaign messaging, and chip away at public trust in democratic institutions. What made this so effective and so hard to fight was the nature of the information itself. Instead of spreading pure lies, the operation used real, or at least partially real information. They just presented it selectively, stripped of all context, to inflict the most damage possible. How do you defend against a truth that's being twisted to tell a lie? It's incredibly difficult, because correcting the record just doesn't have the same viral impact as the initial shocking disclosure. This digital onslaught was then amplified by another Korovian group, the Public Dynamics Bureau, or PDB. This organization commanded an army of thousands of fake social media accounts. But these weren't your typical bots all pushing one message. No, this was far more sophisticated. These fake profiles impersonated a whole spectrum of political identities. Some posed as staunch supporters of one party, others as passionate social justice activists, and still others as fiery nationalists. Their goal wasn't to convince you of anything. It was to make you angry at your own neighbors. The PDB's mission was polarization. They took existing societal disagreements and poured gasoline on them, turning minor differences into deep, unbridgeable divides. This strategy was disturbingly effective, pushing online arguments into the real world. And here's the most groundbreaking and chilling part of their strategy. Some of these fake accounts actually organized real-world protests and rallies. They would create events for opposing sides of a contentious issue, getting unsuspecting citizens to show up and confront each other in the streets. People on both sides thought they were part of a genuine grassroots movement, never realizing they were pawns in a foreign intelligence operation designed to tear their society apart from the inside. This case represents a frightening evolution in modern conflict. It's the seamless fusion of hacking, large-scale psychological warfare, and real-world social engineering. They didn't just breach firewalls. They breached the trust that holds a society together. It's a stark reminder that the battleground of the 21st century isn't just physical. It's in our minds and in our news feeds. This isn't a spy parody. This was a real Russian intelligence operation in The Hague in 2018. This almost comical failure gives us a fascinating peek into the real world of Russian hybrid warfare. And it's not always what you see in the movies. These weren't your typical hackers sitting in a dark room miles away. They were what we could call a close access team, the digital locksmiths sent into the field when remote hacking isn't enough. Their mission? To infiltrate the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, or OPCW. Why? Because the Kremlin was in a full-blown panic. The OPCW was about to independently confirm that Russia had used a military-grade Novichok nerve agent in the assassination attempt on Sergei Skripal in the UK. This was a diplomatic disaster for Moscow, providing undeniable proof of state-sponsored action. Their plan was to discredit the report, steal the data, or maybe even plant fake evidence. But the team they sent was hilariously unprepared. Alexei Morinets, Evgeny Serebryakov, Oleg Satnikov, and Alexei Menin weren't elite field agents. They were office workers on a business trip, following a rigid bureaucratic checklist. Their toolkit looked like it was bought from a budget spy movie prop store. This whole episode screams of a plan cooked up by distant commanders with no real-world field experience. It suggests that while Russia's digital skills might be formidable, their traditional human intelligence and fieldwork can be shockingly amateurish and prone to very expensive mistakes. The real genius here, however, belongs to the Dutch military intelligence, the MIVD. They didn't just catch these four guys in the act. They played the long game. For months before the failed hack, the Dutch had been inside the GRU zone systems. They had hacked the security cameras inside the Russian intelligence agency's Moscow office. They could literally watch the attackers at their desks, see them preparing for missions, and identify them by name. It was an intelligence goldmine. So when the Dutch caught the team in The Hague, they didn't just quietly arrest them. They put on a masterclass in psychological warfare. They held a press conference, showing the world photos of the agents, their passports, and the entire contents of their car. The message to Moscow was crystal clear and deliberately humiliating. We see you. We are in your house. Your most secret units are an open book to us. This public shaming was designed to create paranoia within the GRU, forcing them into costly internal investigations, and to show NATO allies that these supposedly invincible digital ghosts were just ordinary, fallible men who could be caught buying gear at a local electronics store. This brings us to a much darker chapter. Ukraine. The same GRU unit, known to cybersecurity experts as Sandworm or Voodoo Bear, has been using Ukraine as its personal training ground for nearly a decade. Their infamous cyber attacks on Ukraine's power grid in 2015 and 2016, which plunged hundreds of thousands of people into darkness in the middle of winter, weren't just random acts of sabotage. They were dress rehearsals. They were testing their custom malware, refining their tactics, and studying how Ukraine and its Western allies would respond. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion in 2022, Sandworm was unleashed. They transitioned from espionage and disruption to full-spectrum digital warfare, aiming to cripple Ukraine's infrastructure to support the physical invasion. Their long-term operations in Ukraine weren't just about causing chaos. They were about preparing for a major conventional war. The bumbling agents in The Hague and the sophisticated attacks in Ukraine are two sides of the same coin, revealing a complex and sometimes contradictory picture of modern Russian power. February 24, 2022, as Russian tanks rolled across the border, another, quieter invasion was already underway. In the silent realm of cyberspace, a devastating attack was launched against the Viasat-Kasat satellite network. This wasn't just random hacking. It was a strategic first strike, a digital Pearl Harbor for the 21st century. This satellite network was a dual-use target, chosen with chilling precision. In one fell swoop, it severed a vital communications link for the Ukrainian military at the most critical moment of the invasion. But the shockwaves didn't stop there. The attack deliberately caused widespread, visible collateral damage across Europe. Wind farms in Germany sputtered to a halt. Thousands of internet users from France to Poland were knocked offline. The message to the West was loud and clear. Your interconnected modern world is fragile, and we can break it. This wasn't a simple denial of service attack, flooding a server with junk traffic. No, this was far more sophisticated, a multi-stage operation planned months in advance. The attackers had secretly gained control of Viasat's own management system, the very software used to update its customers' modems. They had the keys to the kingdom. From this privileged, God mode position, they pushed out a malicious command disguised as a routine update. It was a digital poison pill, a wipe command that permanently bricked tens of thousands of modems. This wasn't a temporary outage. It was a digital scorched earth tactic, a deliberate, irreversible act of destruction designed to cripple and create lasting chaos. This attack was the thunderous opening act in a new, terrifying chapter of cyber warfare, orchestrated by groups that have haunted the digital world for years. The Russian state-sponsored hackers, collectively known as the Bears. As the war of attrition grinds on, the roles of these bear groups have become highly specialized, seamlessly integrated with physical military operations. Fancy Bear, perhaps the most famous, continues its work in political and military espionage, hacking into Ukrainian government systems to steal battle plans and strategic documents. Meanwhile, Cozy Bear plays the long game. It focuses on deep, persistent infiltration of Western governments, think tanks, and critical infrastructure. It's not about immediate disruption. It's about planting digital spies, laying dormant tripwires for future crises, and gathering intelligence to be used as leverage down the road. But it's the third group, Voodoo Bear, that has become the true digital tip of the spear in this conflict. Their specialty? High-impact wiper attacks. They have unleashed a relentless arsenal of data-destroying malware, with ominous names like Foxblade, Acid Rain, Caddy Wiper, and Hermetic Wiper. Each one is a digital bomb, designed to do one thing: irrevocably erase data, corrupt computer systems, and render them completely useless. Their attacks are often synchronized with artillery barrages and missile strikes. As bombs fall from the sky to obliterate a city physically, Voodoo Bear works to delete its digital memory, its administrative records, financial data, and cultural archives. This is the final, horrifying evolution of these groups. They began as thieves in the night, stealing secrets. They became trolls in the public square, spreading disinformation. Now, they are full-fledged digital arsonists, supporting a brutal war of conquest. The digital arsonist works hand in hand with the soldier. The international hunt for the bears continues, but its very nature has changed. This isn't a simple law enforcement manhunt for a few infamous hackers. It has become a permanent, defensive struggle against a vast, state-funded system. The bears aren't just a handful of wanted individuals. They are an industrial-scale enterprise, constantly replenishing its ranks. For every hacker publicly indicted by the West, a dozen new anonymous coders graduate from top Russian technical universities. They are eagerly recruited into a system that offers them prestige, a sense of patriotic duty, and a stable, well-paying career, insulated from Russia's struggling economy. This isn't a gang. It's a state-sponsored industry. The next phase of this conflict is even more terrifying. Leaked documents from a Russian tech contractor, NTC Vulcan, revealed a paradigm shift in strategy. They are moving beyond spectacular, headline-grabbing attacks towards the weaponization of our everyday systems. Their research focused on how to subtly, almost imperceptibly, slow down railway networks. This isn't about causing a crash. It's about introducing friction, a controlled chaos that makes the system less efficient. It's about sowing doubt and frustration. Imagine a smart power grid experiencing tiny, inexplicable fluctuations. Not a blackout, but small surges and dips that, over months, degrade sensitive manufacturing equipment, causing massive economic damage without a single obvious cause. Imagine the algorithms of high-frequency financial trading being secretly manipulated to introduce microsecond delays. These tiny lags could trigger cascading, multi-million-dollar losses, with the true origin remaining a complete mystery. Imagine the logistics software for a national supermarket chain being covertly altered, not to empty the shelves, but to create constant, low-level shortages of essential goods. The public wouldn't blame a foreign cyber attic. They'd blame their own government for incompetence, fueling anger and eroding public trust. This is slow burn warfare. It's the boiling frog strategy applied to an entire society. The goal is to make an advanced nation feel like it's inexplicably falling apart from the inside, destroying faith in its own institutions. The bears have proven conclusively that the very fabric of our modern, hyper-connected world is a weapon that can be turned against us. We're not talking about a few hackers. We're talking about an estimated 60,000 authors, engineers, psychologists, and disinformation specialists, all collaborating to write a darker version of our future in lines of malicious code and algorithmically amplified lies. They live in the unseen spaces of our global digital infrastructure. They exploit the cognitive gap between one thought and the next. This is not a war that will end with a peace treaty or a victory parade. The digital forest now covers the entire globe, and the bears are a permanent, endemic part of its ecosystem. Our only sustainable defense is a profound societal commitment to perpetual, unblinking vigilance. This means a renewed dedication to basic cybersecurity. It means promoting critical media literacy so we can distinguish fact from fiction. It means stronger international cooperation to defend our shared networks. But most importantly, it means relentlessly shoring up the very foundation of our open societies. Trust. Trust in our democratic institutions, trust in our media, and trust in each other. Because the Bear's ultimate goal is not just to break our systems, but to break our spirit. They see our open society not as a strength, but as a vulnerability to be exploited, manipulated, and ultimately broken.